The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Bye, Barry. And I just crushed it at F45 here in West Boynton. So if you're looking for an amazing workout, look how red my face is. Unbelievable. I'm like a tomato. Need those sunglasses. But the truth is, for me, working out, fitness, and staying in shape is very easy. And it's because I've created the disciplined practice in my life for years. And so talked recently about longevity, health, optimization, taking care of yourself. Well, for me, staying in good shape and being in good fitness isn't very hard. But it's only because I've developed a routine, I've developed a discipline, I've developed a forced practice of exercising essentially my entire life. There's no time in my life outside of maybe when I was a toddler that I didn't play sports and train for something. So throughout all of my youth, I played football, track, wrestling, tennis, you name it, I did it. And in Florida, you can do it outside and you can practice or play outside all year long. And when I got into my 30s, I realized that I wanted to maintain my fitness and maintain my cardiovascular health because around that time, I noticed that my dad was starting to develop cardiovascular issues and he had a silent heart attack. And that gave me a big wake-up call that as I entered into middle age, I really needed to stay focused and stay disciplined. So at 30, I decided that I would train for my first marathon. And actually, that's not true. At 29, I decided I would train for my first marathon. And it took about a year. But at that point, I was certainly not in the best shape. I trained for a year. I found a free online program, which gradually built up to the 26.2 miles that are required to run a marathon. And that's what I did. And I practiced. I developed the discipline of running every day. And I thought that I was doing myself an enormous benefit for my longevity in the future. And that's what I did. So at 30, I ran my first marathon. And then I found that I really enjoyed training for things, training for events. And I hadn't trained for anything as far as fitness is concerned or as far as sports were concerned, really since I was much younger, in my early 20s. And so I thrived on it. I got really competitive. I started to place in local races in my age group. And as I got older and I had put on more weight, I learned there was a Clydesdale division, which is if you're over 220 pounds. And in that division, I was normally in the top 3 because most of the time, those people are a lot bigger and a lot slower than the gazelles that are out there. But I'm sharing this because if I do the same thing over and over again, well, then I'm going to get the same results. And I recognize that I have not really paid attention to many different elements of longevity ever, right? So like, I don't really know what my blood pressure is right now. I think I do. It's hard. Me going to the gym every day is not hard. Me pushing myself cardiovascularly is not hard. Me doing 75 hard, which is a fitness program by Anthony Frisella. I should really know this. But that program for me was not particularly hard because many of the forced practices that they encourage, those disciplines, are things that I already do anyway. So 75 hard wasn't particularly hard for me. But putting on sunscreen every day is hard for me. Going to the dermatologist on a quarterly basis is hard for me. Going to get a colonoscopy is hard for me. I haven't done that yet. And I've pushed that off for at least 10 years because I don't really want somebody shoving a camera up my ass. But nonetheless, I must do those things or I will get a result that I probably don't want to. So, long way of getting to, there are lots of things that I must do that I probably wouldn't have done in the past, but I must, or I know I'm going to suffer in the long term. Now, right now in this market, there are lots of real estate professionals, lots of mortgage professionals, lots of ancillary businesses in the real estate space that are suffering. And I see many of them doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. And that is complete insanity because the reality of it is the market has changed radically. And if you don't know that and you're not taking the actions appropriate for that, chances are you are going to suffer a significant financial crisis. And this is not going to be a deep dive into the housing market or into the data right now. This is going to be focused on what you must do right now as a real estate, mortgage, or sales professional, really in any industry, right now in order to survive what is about to happen. Now, I watched a video yesterday, which is from the All In podcast. It's an interview with the besties talking about, or actually interviewing Ray Dalio. And I've talked a lot about Ray Dalio in the past and many of the books that he has put out there, but he shares exactly what he sees in terms of the obvious financial and global crises that are about to happen. And I may pop in a clip here just so you can see some of the brief talking points because I don't suspect many of you are going to click on the link at all. So I'm going to insert that here and let it play.
Clip here, if I can show you.
Please.
Just the 4 minutes. That's just a brief summary of the cycle. Can you hit it with the clip?
I studied the 10 most powerful empires of the last 500 years and the last 3 reserve currencies. It took me through the rise and decline of the Dutch Empire and the guilder, the British Empire and the pound, the rise and early decline in the United States Empire and the dollar, and the decline and rise of the Chinese Empire and its currencies, as well as the rise and decline of the Spanish, German, French, Indian, Japanese, Russian, and Ottoman empires, along with their significant conflicts, as measured in this chart. To understand China's patterns better, I also studied the rise and fall of Chinese dynasties and their monies back to the year 600. Because looking at all these measures at once can be confusing, I'll focus on the 4 most important ones: the Dutch, British, US, and Chinese. You'll quickly notice the pattern. Now let's simplify the form a bit. As you can see, they transpired in overlapping cycles that lasted about 250 years, with 10 to 20-year transition periods between them. Typically, these transitions have been periods of great conflict because leading powers don't decline without a fight. So how am I measuring an empire's power? In this study, I used 8 metrics. Each country's measure of total power is derived by averaging them together. They are education, inventiveness and technology development, competitiveness in global markets, economic output, share of world trade, military strength, the power of their financial center for capital markets, and the strength of their currency as a reserve currency. Because these powers are measurable, we can see how strong each country is now, was in the past, and whether they're rising or declining. By examining the sequences from many countries, we can see how a typical cycle transpires. And because the wiggles can be confusing, we can simplify it a bit to focus on the pattern of cause-effect relationships that drive the rise and decline of a typical empire. As you can see, better education typically leads to increased innovation and technology development, and with a lag, the establishment of the currency as a reserve currency. You can also see that these forces then declined in a similar order, reinforcing each other's decline. Let's now look at the typical sequence of events going on inside a country that produces these rises and declines. In a nutshell, the big cycle typically begins after a major conflict, often a war, establishes the new leading power and the new world order. Because no one wants to challenge this power, a period of peace and prosperity typically follows. As people get used to this peace and prosperity, they increasingly bet on it continuing. They borrow money to do that, which eventually leads to a financial bubble. The empire's share of trade grows, and when most transactions are conducted in its currency, it becomes a reserve currency, which leads to even more. At the same time, this increased prosperity distributes wealth unevenly, so the wealth gap typically grows between the rich haves and the poor have-nots. Eventually, the financial bubble bursts, which leads to the printing of money and increased internal conflict between the rich and the poor, which leads to some form of revolution to redistribute wealth. This can happen peacefully or as a civil war. While the empire struggles with this internal conflict, its power diminishes relative to external rival powers on the rise. When a new rising power gets strong enough to compete with the dominant power that is having domestic breakdowns, external conflicts, most typically wars, take place. Out of these internal and external wars come new winners and losers. Then the winners get together to create the new world order, and the cycle begins again.
And if you made it this far into the video, I'm going to assume that you actually watched the clip of the interview. And it is impossible to ignore what is going to happen next. Now, I don't know when these things are going to happen. What I do know is they are predictable. I don't know what the intensity of the market chaos will be. I just know that it's going to happen. Now, when I was a stockbroker, and to be clear, I haven't forgot about the best practices for mortgage or real estate or sales professionals out there. I'm going to get to that. But it's important to understand that when I was a stockbroker, I had experienced trading and profiting off of market chaos, off of stock market insanity. And when the banking sector failed, and it was obvious that the real estate sector was failing, then I was able to trade around those obvious weaknesses and sector weaknesses. And so this is not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor anymore. So do not take it that way. But be aware that you can make money in a bull market. You can make money in a bear market. You can make money in every market that there is if you know exactly what to do. And so when I was a stockbroker and I saw people losing their effing minds, clients, professionals surrounded me, everyone that I was exposed to, they were all losing their minds, and many of them didn't know what to do next. But I did. And it's not because I'm so smart. It's because I knew that bulls make money and bears make money. So I found where the most volatility was, that was the most predictable, and I traded around it. So when the banks went almost bankrupt and the system failed and the real estate builders sector was failing, I bought ETFs that let me participate in the destruction of the equity of those companies. I bought bear ETFs. And at the time, they were brand new products. So you could profit immensely in that limited time space because they were so brand new and the institutions did not dominate the market and they didn't have the high speed trading the same way they do now. Now you can't do the same thing. But in that market, when the products were brand new, you could. And I made my clients a fortune just on volatility. Separate to that, when I saw some of these major companies that were actually too big to fail, and I knew they were too big to fail based on my own research, not anyone else's. I knew that when Bank of America was at $2 and when Ford was at $1, or maybe it was even less than that, I knew that those companies and companies like it were once in a lifetime opportunities. I've since changed my opinion. It might be twice in a lifetime opportunities, except the next bailout, I don't think bodes as well for anybody. So I'm not giving the advice to go all in if you see Bank of America at $1. I'm not giving any advice on that yet to be determined. But my point is, when I saw value in the market, I went after it aggressively. I built positions in those companies and I let them sit. I added to them as much as I possibly could. I built positions in these massively undervalued situations and I let my winners run. I cut my losers off to the 50-day moving average. And I never made my clients or myself more money than in the market chaos that existed during the great financial crisis. 1000% truth, period. The housing market doesn't work that way. It just does not work that way. So when the market fails, and it will, period, there are going to be undervalued situations which present themselves. And in the real estate space, in the residential real estate space, there are going to be opportunities for an opportunistic investor to build a massive real estate portfolio and set themselves up for generational wealth based on being at the right place at the right time and having the capitalization to do so. So I am very bullish about the future because I know exactly what to do. Now, let's get back to the real estate and sales professionals. Right now, if you look at the failure rate in the real estate space, and I believe in my market, and I'll just use Palm Beach County as the example, there are 40,000 agents that exist, ballpark figure, that are out there that have licenses that are quote unquote real estate professionals. Well, of that, only 1,000 of them do 10 deals or more a year, which tells me there are 39,000 people that are about to be out of a job, period, because there are far less deals that are happening. There are about 40% less transactions happening right now in today's market as compared to a year ago. Well, why is that? It's because the buyers are priced out. It's because the sellers are priced out. They can't trade out of their 2% mortgage and into an 8% mortgage. So there is far less business happening. And it's far more competitive to get that business unless you take drastic action now. And if you are not out there doing income generating activities, you are going to be out of business very quickly, which doesn't mean you won't ever find another job and doesn't mean that it's the end of the world for you, but your real estate career will very likely be over, period. So what would I do if I was in that position? And I'm not. But what would I do? Well, the first thing I would do is I would pick up the phone. When somebody calls you, pick up the phone. when you're doing a deal with somebody else, I would be very, very, very intentional about creating $1 million impression with every person that you meet. Get them to know you, like you, trust you, know what industry you're in, and follow up with them frequently so that they don't forget about you. Now, recently I just did a deal. I'm working with some buyers who happen to also be sellers. They are under contract and about to close on 2 properties. And despite everything you've heard about the market being volatile and difficult, well, on their particular listings, I created a market within a market by pricing it the right way. And I got them multiple offers, which bid the price higher and set records for their type of product in their type of community for their sale. And so they were thrilled, and I did it very quickly. So I did it in record time. That's not me bragging. It's just sharing what a best practice is when you're selling a home or a property. In this case, they were not homes. They were condos and townhouses. But their selling pain and uncertainty was resolved very quickly. But the next thing that they were afraid of is, where am I going to be able to buy? Where am I going to be able to live? And they had sticker shock when they saw what their new taxes would be. But because I knew how to explain to them what homestead portability is and that they qualified for that benefit, at the end of the day, they ended up realizing that their fear around what the new taxes would be was primarily just fear. It was unfounded. And it wasn't as big of a deal as they thought it was going to be. But that's still accounting for the fact that, look, home taxes, property taxes in the state of Florida and everywhere else have probably exploded. So has home insurance, so has property insurance, so have home prices. But the market's changed. So we're shopping. I showed them 4 or 5 homes. I legitimately talked them out of buying 4 or 5 homes because I knew it wasn't the right home for them and their circumstances. And I'm not going to get into a whole detailed list of why, but I knew what they needed. I knew what their must-haves were, and I want them to get what they want. So I talked them out of every other home until we found the right one. And the reason we got the home that we did, which is perfect for them, and they are completely blown away that they got the opportunity to buy this home, but it's because the buyer for the home they wanted to buy couldn't perform. The mortgage professional and the real estate professional that had it under contract had not done their due diligence. And when it came time to close, the buyer did not qualify for a loan anymore. So their misfortune was our good fortune. But I then had to get into rapport with the buyer's agent. The listing agent. And I had to demonstrate that although my clients do have 2 property contingencies on their sales, there are 2 property sale contingencies that are associated with this purchase contract. They're past the contingency period. There's 0% risk inherent in them accepting this contract. And if the listing agent didn't pick up the phone and didn't get into rapport, didn't receive my message, did not act professionally and want to solve the problem, well, then chances are we probably wouldn't have got the home under contract. But thankfully, she is a professional and I give her a lot of credit. But I'm sharing this because the easiest way to grow your business is to be intentional about connecting with people at the highest level. Meet them where they are, solve their pain points, and they will want to do business with you. They will want to remember you and do more business in the future. So always leave $1 million impression. And I hope that's what I'm doing for you now. I hope I am providing some value and context for the market. Now, that being said, I am going to do a live stream tonight, and I will do a deep dive analysis into any market you want me to throughout the state of Florida, but also I can go wide, I can go big, I can go anywhere. So no matter what market you want to know what's going on, you want to know the truth about, please reach out. Actually, don't reach out. Please be on the live stream tonight with your questions, and I will answer each and every one of them. And we're going to have a heck of a lot of fun. So go out there, win the day. If you need anything, please reach out. You know where to find me. Check out my next video. And until next time, peace.